Tonight's first order of business. With a federal election mere days away, many Canadians are hungry for real vision on the economy. So in this long election campaign, have we heard it? And there are good ideas from three federal parties about reviving a weak economy. With the longer view in mind, what about laying the groundwork for the economy to thrive not just next year, but next generation? Welcome to The Exchange. We're down to the wire. In 3 days, Canadians pick just who they think is the best to lead the country. After one of the longest and tightest campaigns in decades, many seem to have already made up their mind. More than 3.6 million Canadians showed up at advanced polls to vote. That is a jump of 71% from the number of advanced ballots cast back in 2011. 26 million Canadians in total are eligible to vote on Monday. Polls show that the vast majority of them consider the economy the number one issue, probably because it stumbled into a recession this year. A catalyst was when the price of oil fell off a cliff. Starting last July, our economy, of course, followed suit. 20% of Canada's GDP is tied to the oil and gas sector. The economy shrank for 2 straight quarters, marking Canada's first recession since the global financial crisis. And that has some policymakers calling for economic change, even the one that represents the heart of the resource sector.
We know it's a problem. We can't fix the price of oil. We can start to take steps to diversify the economy away from that reliance.
Most Canadians feel the same way. A recent poll found 63% of us want Canada's economy more diversified and less dependent on the oil and gas resource sector. Only 15% felt that we should promote growth of that sector. In a quarterly C-suite survey, nearly 2/3 of corporate execs in the country feel we rely too much on Alberta's oil patch. Where do the leaders stand? Well, the Conservative Stephen Harper has touted his economic record of the past 9 years. He's pledging no new taxes and a balanced budget. The Liberals' Justin Trudeau would run a budget deficit for 3 years and spend on infrastructure. He would raise taxes on high-income earners and cut them for the middle class. Meanwhile, NDP leader Tom Mulcair pledges 4 years of budget surpluses. He says he'd impose a $15 minimum hourly wage, raise corporate tax, and cut small business tax. That's the short-term vision, but what they see beyond the horizon is not so clear. Global rankings show Canada is lagging on the innovation front. In response, one prominent former public servant says what we do about that will shape our economic future. Now, Vice Chair of BMO, Kevin Lynch, recently wrote in a Globe and Mail op-ed, the simple answer is change. The evidence rather clearly suggests that more of the same is not going to solve the problem. Canada needs a sharper focus on the right mix of government policies and local conditions that can create global top-tier innovation ecosystems in Canada that have the density to benefit the entire economy. So how does the tone and style of this campaign in this election differ from those in the past? Well, there are a few people who've seen more of them than Peter Mansbridge, chief correspondent of CBC News and anchor of The National. That makes you sound old, but
you wouldn't do that.
How many have you seen? How many campaign elections have you now?
Well, I mean, the first one I remember was 58. I mean, I was just a kid. I was 10 years old, but I can remember because we had our first television getting the sense that was the deep sweep of 58. The Conservatives won the biggest majority in the history of the country in terms of seats. And I remember that. I remember watching CBC that night.
Of course.
First one I worked on was 72, Trudeau minority, squeaker. Over Stanfield in 72. I was a local reporter in your old hometown of Winnipeg, yep. Covering the story then, and you know, everything since then.
Everyone since then. And obviously you've watched them all, not just on election night, which is of course how you're so prominently known to Canadians, but every single day throughout that election. How does this was a long one, and I think at the beginning people felt it was going to be so long that it might actually become boring or nothing would happen. How did it feel to you? Because it doesn't seem really boring in retrospect.
It wasn't boring, but it was long, and I think for most Canadians they kind of split it. Labor Day was really the start for most Canadians. I mean, I think they watched that first debate, which was in early August, made some decisions based early, you know, in terms of how that debate unfolded. But I think they really got into it on the week following Labor Day. More debates to come, more pronouncements from the various parties. I think there was some positive about the long campaign in the sense there were more debates. I think the whole debate structure in Canadian elections is going to change as a result of this. And if there was one thing that was unfair is that a lot of Canadians didn't get to see any of the debates because of the way they were broadcast and not broadcast. But So, you know, I think that's a positive. Did they get a real airing of the issues? You know, I'm listening to you go through, you know, the economy. That's the #1 issue, supposedly, of Canadians. Did they actually hear real discussion and debate on some of the things you were bringing up? And I think some Canadians would probably say, you know, no, they didn't. It kept getting deflected by all parties into different kind of one-off issues that grabbed headlines for a day or two and then moved on.
I wanted to ask you about that specifically because we've talked on the Bottom Line and elsewhere about the vision idea, the idea that there would be an actual plan for jobs, which is what people care about, and their economic future and their security. Is it typical, though, of an election campaign that you don't get, you know, very rarely is there a single issue like the GST or a NAFTA deal? Usually, is it like this where it's sort of a bit of a hodgepodge?
It is usually a bit of a hodgepodge, and a lot of it's controlled by, you know, the kind of tours that the leaders do, the kind of policies they want to talk about, conflicting with what the media wants to get at in terms of, you know, breaking news and breaking stories. And sometimes the more substantive issues just don't get aired, perhaps as well as they should. But, you know, it's a three-way street, I like to say. The parties have to outline their positions. The media has to cover them intensely and challenge. But the public's got to want to know about this stuff. They want to be informed, and they've got to show that they care about it. And it's not good enough in the last week to sort of call us up and say, hey, you didn't tell me about such and such, where in fact we had, but it was, you know, a few weeks ago and you weren't interested, right? Will
you make a prediction about just how late in the evening we'll find out a sense of what's happening Monday?
I think you'll see trends. You have the potential of seeing trends early out of Atlantic Canada. You got to be careful. It's, you know, 32 seats there. It's like less than 10% of the overall total, but you have the potential to see trends there. If one party's like really rushing away with it, you go, well, that may have an impact through the rest of the evening if there is a feeling in the country about change, which has supposedly been one of the big issues on the part of a lot of Canadians.
Peter, this is my last show here on The Exchange and
I've
on
heard
CBC, not to surprise you with that.
And this is the first time you've invited me on your program.
On the new show, that's true. We had you on the old show. It's a delight to have you, not just because of your deep knowledge of this subject, but also because working with you was top of the list of the appeal of coming to CBC. So I did want to thank you personally for that, and partly because, like most Canadians, you are so representative of what this place is and is supposed to be. Well, listen, it's been a treat, the relationship that we've had. I've really enjoyed it. As you know, I was one of those who convinced you to come and join us because we needed you and your talents and your expertise and your knowledge of the sector that you cover as part of our work. It's been great working with you on the National, the Bottom Line, and various other programs, and you know that I am going to miss you. Likewise. Don't be a stranger. I won't. Peter Mansbridge, our chief correspondent. Still ahead, oil companies pledge to do their part to fight climate change, and they hope you'll do the same. The Roundup is next. The heads of some of the world's biggest oil companies held a press conference in Paris today to say they're not the bad guys when it comes to climate change. That story kicks off the Roundup.
Energy companies with strong human capacity, strong technology capacities, strong financial capacities are clearly part of the solution.
Execs from 10 oil and gas companies pledged to do more to help, including improving energy efficiency, cutting emissions, and working with governments and other groups. They also pointed out the progress they've made thus far. This, of course, comes just weeks before a major UN climate summit in Paris. Roger Griffiths is chair of the Monk Debates, Bruce Sellery, a columnist with Money Sense, Ian Lee, an assistant prof at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton, for a special edition of the Roundup. Ian, I'm going to take it out to you first and say, you know, we know there's been a PR effort by big oil, and maybe this is a good thing. First of all, is it credible? And second of all, we should note the fact that there are no American oil companies at this table. You can decide for me if you think that matters.
That's unfortunate that the Americans aren't there. This is long overdue by the oil industry. I think this whole issue captures what's wrong with the environmental movement. And I want to be very blunt but very clear. They have misrepresented and deceived huge numbers of people around the world by telling us that these big, bad, evil oil companies are the source of all our problems, and if we just get rid of them, the whole world will be better. And they fail to tell us that, as Pogo taught us, we have met the enemy. It is us, because we are consuming the oil and gas produced by the oil companies. They're not producing it for themselves, they're producing it for us. So now finally the oil companies are pushing back to speak truth to power.
Bruce, I mean, obviously it is true we are the consumers of this product. On the other hand, as long as we want it, does it help to have them say, okay, we're going to try to do this as efficiently as possible? Can they be part of a 2% solution?
Can they and should they? They must be. I mean, you referenced no American companies. I'm here in Calgary today, no Canadian companies on that list. And that's a big opportunity, right? What was striking for me in the release here was the acknowledgement of the temperature goal, the 2% temperature goal, and also the phrase that energy needs to be brought to us in a sustainable manner. And that's a pretty big deal. What I would say from a public relations, a government relations standpoint is these global companies need to get ahead of it and be a part of the conversation and be a part of the strategy for solving this problem, acknowledging that there are very big differences for consumers in different geographies, for governments in different geographies, and there will be some very tangible challenges for aligning the industry, like carbon pricing versus carbon tax versus nothing. It's not going to be clear which is the best solution, but they need to come together and move forward with some suggestions.
Well, Amanda, to jump in here, my takeaway is that the hangman's noose focuses your mind like nothing else. And what these companies realize is that come Paris, come a matter of weeks, we are going to be negotiating a legally binding treaty with real penalties if the negotiations are successful. And it seems like there's new energy, new impetus out of the United States, but also out of China and some of the big emitters that haven't been part of these global pacts in the past. So I think this is a kind of 11th hour deathbed conversion by some of the more progressive oil companies who want to try to have a future for their businesses in a new, kind of super Kyoto world. And I second Bruce's remarks. Shame on Canada and the United States for not being at the table, because this is coming and these companies need to get with this now or their shareholders will pay a price later.
Fair enough. But I think, and I'll start with you, Rudyard, but I bet you Ian is going to have a response to this. I think this is a little bit like McDonald's introducing salads. I mean, they have a core business. It's a core business that works for them. Suddenly there's sort of bad PR around it, and so they introduced a salad. Did you know that the salad's almost as fatty and high calorie as the burger? But never mind. Is this really just PR? Because the oil companies themselves can't be responsible for meaningful change. Governments and regulatory bodies have to.
Ian made an important point. We are not suddenly getting off oil tomorrow. No. We're not going to even see peak demand for oil until 2030, 2035. So we need a bridging phase here where more efficiently extracted hydrocarbons are used in more efficient engines and efficient energy systems to lower their carbon impact to get us to that carbon zero future. But that's going to take decades. Oil's going to be around for a long time to come.
It also isn't just PR, it's strategy too, because a lot of the companies on this list have big gas interests, and it serves them to have a reduction in coal and an increase in gas. Some of them have big exposure to sustainable energy like wind. So it isn't just PR. I think it is a strategic move to ensure that some of the elements of their business are going to be front and center.
Ian?
I mean, yes, we're going to be, the IEA has said we're going to be using fossil fuels for somewhere between 70 and 80% of the world's energy, not just Canada, not just, the United States, until 2050. So yes, I applaud this announcement today. Let's kill coal. Let's agree it's 50% of the world's problem of GHG, and let's be much more rational and incremental in our approach, which the environmental groups are not doing in demonizing all the oil and gas companies when in fact they represent a bridge to that future when we are carbon free.
All right, well, Bruce mentions gas, and I want to get to another leg of this story, which is Toyota jumping on the climate change bandwagon. The Japanese car company saying it wants to reduce emissions from its cars 90% by 2050, the year 2050. It'll do it by selling mostly hybrids and fuel cell vehicles. Toyota has projected that by 2020, annual sales of its fuel cell vehicles will surpass 30,000, 10 times its projected figure for 2017. It is also forecasting it'll sell 15 million hybrids by 2020. Double what it has sold so far globally. Some people were calling this today the end of the internal combustion engine. And Bruce, obviously, it's nice talk. To me, the problem with this is it's a kind of a vision before there's actual real infrastructure. And I'll go back to this stuff happens by laws and government policy. It doesn't happen particularly because one company says we want you in a hybrid.
Oh, Amanda. vision should always lead. Infrastructure, what are you thinking here? That is how we got to the moon. That is how most things get made. So I think infrastructure absolutely needs to follow. And what I love about this is it's audacious. What gets measured gets managed. And Toyota says 2050, well, that's a goal. You can actually create a work-back schedule to both develop the technology and the marketing plan. Because I think the biggest hurdle here is not going to be technology.
There's somebody, Amanda, called Elon Musk, who's gone with a very different system, electric car batteries, ion lithium batteries. This is, I think, put fuel cell technology way back in terms of its competition for the build-out that you're skeptical about. I share your view. Bruce, I just don't think you have this one right. This is a hope and a dream and a prayer on the part of Toyota that fuel cell technology is going to beat out batteries.
I would forget about the logistics of how that mix is going to be in terms of hybrid versus fuel cell. I think they have stated something bold and daring, and it's going to take a lot of work to get there. But I have confidence that that work is going to yield something, even if it isn't 2050.
Ian, your thoughts?
I have to agree. And you know, Amanda, for the last 25 years, I've spent, it seems, half of my life fighting over idiotic batteries running out of juice. Whether it's on my laptop, whether it's on my BlackBerry. This is almost dead right now. And I am so skeptical. I'm reading these stories now. People in California are fighting in the parking lots over the charger. You know, the Prius pulls out the plug and the next Prius puts it in. I am very, very skeptical about breakthroughs in battery. I think it's going to come from something else. I don't know what it is, but I'm much more pessimistic on batteries, so I'm with Bruce.
But the thing that ties these two stories together, Rudyard, and I'm going to start with you, is I still think, I mean, Bruce is right? You do need vision, you do need, but he used the example of the moon. A government made that call. That wasn't some, you know, crazy inventor saying, I'm going to go to the moon, although we now have people like that saying it about Mars. Big change comes, or at least we've seen it in the last kind of 150 years, from laws, regulations, insurance policies, really mundane stuff. If the governments that get together in Paris say, this will be so, then businesses will innovate to meet that goal. And is that not the right order of events?
I think that gets you halfway there. And in terms of public policy, yes, those charging stations that Ian's talking about that people are fighting over, that to me is a good sign. That's a sign that there is a robust marketplace for those cars and for people that want to access the energy systems that support those cars. So again, I think that's a vote for batteries and a more skepticism about Toyota's big bet on hydrogen fuel cells.
Amanda, I think we need to send you back for a bit of a business history lesson, because if we think about most of the transformative changes in business over generations, over centuries, they've been driven by companies, innovation, technological innovation, either to meet a consumer need that they knew they had or when they didn't. If we look at technological transformation, Google didn't have a mandate, Facebook didn't have a mandate from the government. They weren't enabled by the government.
No, let's be clear about what we're talking about here. I'm not talking about governments choosing the innovations. I'm certainly not suggesting that we regulate what wins. And we've seen real, and we'll get to our next story on that front, we've seen real trouble when governments try to pick which is the futuristic technology. But when we try to correct behaviors, acid rain is the best, most famous example. You know it. If it were left to industry, we would still not be able to swim in Lake Michigan.
But
as
Amanda,
it is, the government said, you've got X number of months to do away with it. They all said, you're going to put us out of business. The opposite happened. Acid rain disappeared. They innovated and they became more profitable. So what I'm saying is, if we're serious, and yes, Ian, I will let you talk at some point, I'm saying if we're serious, you set the goal and then let businesses innovate their way towards it. Go, Ian.
Very quickly, let's acknowledge that when government puts its mind to work on a public policy failure, in other words, a pure public good, you know, defeating the Nazis in the Second World War, going to the moon, that was not a commercial, private, competitive marketplace. Governments have a role there. But I agree with Bruce. If we're just talking, quote, ordinary technologies, man, we're talking private goods. That is not where government should be, because they have a record of unbelievable failure in those areas. They should stick to things like going to the moon, ending acid rain, fighting terrible regimes elsewhere, but not get into private competitive markets.
Let me be clear. I'm not saying the government should decide whether it's internal combustion or fuel cell or what I'm saying is the governments of Paris could say, this is how we plan to do this. We're going to cap and trade. We're going to put a price on carbon that captures all the downstream externalities, including healthcare costs. And suddenly you say, go figure it out, oil and gas companies. Go figure it out, car companies. Consumers, you're now at the table. And then you see what happens. And I think that could be pretty exciting if we actually see something like that come to pass.
That's if, you know, I agree with you in that sense. I mean, we could do it tomorrow morning. We could increase the gasoline tax and put it up by 50 cents or $1 a liter. But then you're running back into that problem that the moment consumers start to realize that the price of heating their house or driving their car is going to go up 50% or 100%, there's going to be very serious pushback, which is why I think it's got to come from technological innovation on the efficiency side.
Ian's right. It's a very depressing argument, but it's true. We all care about climate change. We're worried about, we want something to happen. But when those externalities come back into our pocketbooks, people freak out. And suddenly it's, you know, it's somebody else's problem. It's the big companies' issue to pay for and solve. At the end of the day, we need to understand that solving climate change means each and every one of us taking on those externalities. It's going to be a long time until we're ready to do that.
Okay, Bruce, I'm not going to let you say anything on this one because I want to just shift gears to get to this other story, which is a pretty fascinating one. T. Boone Pickens, who we know as an energy billionaire in the U.S., is suing the government of Ontario $700 million over its changed policies on wind power. Now, the reason I find this fascinating is we just signed another trade agreement that gives individuals and corporations the ability under trade agreements to sue governments. We've had a couple of these lawsuits already under NAFTA. This is another one. Bruce, is this well timed as we look at what's inside TPP and ask the question, do we really want rich Americans suing our governments?
Well, it is the trade thing. It is also in the context of the gas plant controversy, right? So from the perspective of the government here, it's yet another slam on credibility on how these contracts get awarded. So I have great compassion for the people who need to be fielding those calls and fighting that court case, because there's much more at stake than just $700 million here.
Ian,
Amanda,
I'm going to give you a quick word on this.
Very quickly. First off, these agreements called FIPAs have been grotesquely misrepresented. They are consumer protection agreements for us, we the people, against corrupt politicians who are in bed with their crony capitalist friends who want to give special protectionist preference to one company over other companies so they can charge all of us more money. So I want these things celebrated to protect us from corrupt governments and corrupt crony capitalism.
Do you have a few seconds?
Well, just very briefly on this lawsuit, it's spurious. I mean, T. Boone's Pickens is basically saying that other people's lobbyists were better than his. He's notorious for using lobbyists in the United States to advance his own interests there. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. T. Boone Pickens should pick up his lawsuit and head back to Texas. Okay,
well, you guys are going to, of course, be back next week on the exchange, but I did promise to give you a word in here. Ian, and I did want to say to each one of you, thank you so much for being part of this show. So, Ian, I don't know if you want to say something to me right now, but I wanted to say that to each of you.
I just very quickly, I've been watching CBC since I was 5 years old because my mother and father only allowed CBC Radio and television in my house. I want to say that I think you have done a great service to CBC and to Canada because you raised the bar of business journalism in this country, and you should be applauded for that because you didn't practice business bigotry where you assume all businesses are corrupt and evil and, you know, out to exploit the consumer.
Ian, it's always a pleasure.
It's my great pleasure.
Yeah, Amanda, business is an issue that's part of our lives. And I think what I've enjoyed about this show and being on air with you is that you've taken that issue seriously here at the Exchange. You've elevated the conversation. And this is one of the last few pieces of real estate on TV where we can have big, serious conversations and debates about the issues. So hats off to you. Hats off to all your producers and all the people that stand behind you at this show.
And of course,
Amanda,
Bruce,
I want to thank you for three things, Amanda. First, your passion for ideas, for debate, and for business. I want to thank you for your quick wit. Being on the air with you is like flying a fighter jet all the time. You never know what's going to happen. And I want to thank you most of all for your humor. There is no one better being on television with than you.
Thanks to all of you. It is such a pleasure to spend time with you. We'll do it again.
We will.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Still ahead, we'll introduce you to the team that creates the Exchange from scratch every weekday. North American stock markets posted gains today. It takes a whole team to bring the exchange to life every weekday. You may already be familiar with the producers from our regular story meetings. In today's final meeting, we also invited the behind-the-scenes staff, including our director, floor director, and makeup and hair professionals, all of whom are the ones who really make the exchange possible. Together, we reminisced about working on the show.
Thank you, Amanda, for helping us create TV magic so consistently.
I can say that I never envisioned myself falling into business journalism, and then I came onto the show, and you've made me fall in love with business journalism.
But I have to say, I've never worked with a harder working host.
Less about me and more about the show.
You guys have been able to put together a really thoughtful, engaging program, whether or not you're a CEO or just a television viewer. It's engaging and it's fun.
I learn something every day. It's been a great learning experience, and I can never get enough of it.
There's such a diverse bunch of people that come as guests, and you know, often we go, well, we don't agree with that, or yeah, that's really good, you know. But it's just always interesting.
You put a lot of faith in me and all the producers, and you also always held us to a very high standard. And I know as a journalist, my work has improved immensely over the years because you've held us to that standard.
You might be the person in the studio that the spotlight is on, but you've put the spotlight on all of the members of our team in their own way for what their strengths are, and I think that we've seen everybody grow so much.
I look around this room and I see young people, I see older people, people who've been in the business a long time. I see people from Western Canada, from Eastern Canada, from Central Canada, we've gone to school in many different places, and something you've encouraged is all of these viewpoints have made it into the show.
Just know you're leaving giant shoes to fill, and they're stilettos.
It's a team effort, and nothing happens without that team. And that's so important now because at this final meeting, this team will remain off camera doing this show. So while I go, and you know, as sad as I am to leave you guys, I'm still gonna hope to see it at 7 o'clock on CBC as great as ever, because the show goes on. A couple of faces missing from that meeting that are normally there. Producers Mark Babby and Carrie Johnson could not be there, and our senior show producer, Kirsty Jeffries, my longtime producer who's on maternity leave. I missed her today and will miss her terribly in future. Meanwhile, the show will go on. It's off next Monday as CBC brings you live coverage of the federal election, but you can continue to watch The Exchange on CBC News Network starting next Tuesday. And also, of course, a regular here on the show and in that meeting are Peter Armstrong.
You know, I looked at that meeting and I think to myself, the very first time I was in that meeting and I came on this show and I went home and my mom called me and said, your posture is terrible. And to the last day, I'm slouching in my chair. I'm still going to hear it from my mom.
That Making the Cut segment was controversial from the very beginning.
Yes,
it was an idea that I had. It literally is styled off of TMZ, where the people sit around and talk about stories. What I liked about it was a combination of the showing actually how we arrive at decisions, right? We hash things out, we debate things, and it seemed important. And also, our producers get stopped on the street now because people recognize them, and you know what? I think that's really cool.
And they're crazy smart, and it highlighted that. And I don't know if it did as good a job as it possibly could because they're so smart, and that conversation is so interesting. And for me, as you know, I'm the news reporter in the newsroom. I sort of come blasting into your meeting late, and I sort of weigh in and then run out early, and then I try to meet all my deadlines. And it's that team that sort of puts together a bit of a package for me to come in and actually sit down and have this chat with you every day. And so much of television is... You
way underplay how hard you work and the news gathering you do on your own. Well, I hear you across the room.
But part of what makes this work is making it look effortless. And it is so not effortless. And it's really hard work. And all of that work that happens behind the scenes, and that room full of people that you know, these viewers saw every day, and the extended gang that we had in there today, they're the ones that put in so much effort that make it look seamless and effortless. And it's a really wonderful team.
And you're going to keep doing it. Thanks, Peter.
I sure hope so.
Peter Armstrong. Coming up, he was a dragon. He'll always be the wealthy barber, and he was a frequent guest on this show. David Chilton joins us after the break. For now, we'll leave you with a few messages we've received from you. The last time the U.S. Federal Reserve hiked its key interest rate was in 2006, 3 years before I started at the CBC. It's been nearly a decade that the Fed and other central banks have been cutting and maintaining low rates. Some people think they could stay there for a long time. David Chilton is in that camp. We spoke earlier and I asked him why he's of that opinion.
I think rates are going to stay low because inflation can't grab hold. A lot of reasons. Demographics in the developed world are definitely deflationary. You've got a slow recovery. Commodity prices are plummeting. Globalization to some extent tends to keep prices suppressed. But the big reason that no one's talking about, not even economists, exponential technologies. Everything from virtual reality to artificial intelligence to 3D printing all lowers costs over time, and these are coming fast right now.
So the problem, of course, is if we can't normalize interest rates back to what we think proper returns should be, it affects our expectations for our investment returns.
Well, absolutely, and pensions, insurance companies, all these people are going to have to deal with a very challenging environment, in my mind, for a lot longer than they thought. Who knows what normal interest rates are? I mean, if inflation stays subdued, maybe these are the proper level. But again, I don't think people are grasping the kind of disruption that's coming from these technologies. They have been going like this, doubling in productivity over time, but now we've hit the inflection point and they're about to shoot up. So things like 3D printing, a cute idea 5 years ago that rich hobbyists got involved with, is suddenly going to be very impactful. People might break a toilet in 5 years and print it. Why does that matter? Because they take out all the distribution. They take out the retailer, they take out the distributor, etc. And the money savings go directly to their pocket. Potentially consumers can win big, but employment suffers, and again, prices stay subdued. That affects interest rates.
So one of the things policymakers want at some point is for prices, to see some kind of traction on prices, wages. If you were advising, whether it's a central bank or a prime minister, what do you do in this environment if it's low for long?
I don't know, and you know, there's not much you can do about these exponential technologies, and there really isn't. They're coming and they're coming fast, and again, not many people realize that. Let me give you another example. It's crazy. Virtual reality. We think of now as putting on the goggles and watching some sort of graphics and getting all excited about what it looks like 3D. Forget that. We're 3 years away from you putting on a bodysuit once. It takes your perfect measurements, and then you have an avatar. You then put these goggles on and watch your avatar try on all the different outfits that you might buy. All of them in different colors, different shapes, with different purses. Plus, your friend at home clicks in and she watches it with you and goes, I don't like that on you. That doesn't look good. Change your hair. You can do all those things through virtual reality. You don't go to the retail shop. These are the types of things that are coming and coming quickly. And again, very disruptive, but they all lower prices because they take people out of the chain. So how do you avoid that if you're a policymaker? I don't know. This is very tricky stuff, and lots of it's positive, by the way, what it's going to do to healthcare. But there's a lot of challenges. Another quick example, I'm involved with a company right now who's using Watson, and they're downloading it with all the Canadian tax information. And they're going to be able to give tax advice by harnessing the power of the machine intelligence and machine learning through Watson and their own expertise. But all of a sudden, all the advisors out there, they could harness this too, but they're also to some extent threatened by it. Prices will come down. It's fascinating times, but a little scary. The intimidation out there is high.
Although one of the things we know about the way economies unfold is that we don't really know how they unfold. So we can try to predict. It's possible that this unleashes actually extra profit. It actually could create more sort of monetary velocity and therefore inflation.
Well, I don't know about that. I think it's going to potentially have great profits. I do think margin suppression will be the order of the day when you have this kind of speed of change, but I worry about the distribution of those profits. That, like a lot of the things we're dealing with now, they'll find their way to the very top and not necessarily to the masses, but the impact on employment is going to be a challenge. And you know, in the past, everybody said, hey, with new technologies, jobs are lost, but we've always come up with other ideas. And the human mind is so clever, we've gone other directions and jobs have come along with them, better jobs in most cases. I'm worried this time. Like artificial intelligence alone could knock all kinds of people out. Think about education in 10 years. You're not going to have a teacher standing in front of a classroom teaching everybody at the same pace. We shouldn't be doing that now based on the technology we have. So this is all going to be really crazy to watch unfold. Lots of positives, but some real challenges.
Things do change. One of the things that's changing, of course, is this is my last day on the exchange.
Sad.
And I just wanted to say thank you for all of the time we've spent together here. I know you'll still be a friend of the show, but it's been a pleasure having you.
It has, and I've learned a lot from you. I really have. You're a true professional. You're great at what you do. I've loved co-hosting. I've loved being a guest, and I wish you nothing but the best going forward.
David, great to have you here today.
You too. Thank you.
You think it's easy for me to be right all the time?
Must be very
how hard this is on me?
I feel
Because I have to listen to this noise from you, but I'm right. This is what's going to happen. It's that simple.
Oh, dear. Remember those days? Kevin OLeary will be here for a special look back at our time together at CBC. Major commodities were mixed today. Welcome to the Lang & O'Leary Exchange. Kevin, we've got a great show lined up. Good to see you, first
Great
of
to
all.
be here, Amanda.
I want to start with a story that's very close. You're already smiling. I love when stories make you happy. It's such a good thing.
Because they involve money. The real heart of this are two elements, jobs and housing, and they both suck. That's a basic problem. That's a term we use in investing, Amanda.
Yeah, we're not allowed to use that term on the show.
Well, I'm using it.
Please avoid it. Try to another word that a 6-year-old might use.
I'm trying to
Anything
express how bad I think
Somebody
the idea
get this
is.
man a thesaurus.
How bad it is. When we're finished talking, you're going to agree with me.
How long have you got?
I'm just telling you, Amanda, listen to what I say and do exactly what I do and don't ask any questions.
That's definitely going to happen in 2011 or never. Yep, the first 5 years of my time here at CBC was spent sitting across from Kevin O'Leary. Then I got out on good behavior. But he's here for one final exchange. Kevin, great to have you back.
Great to be back.
It's weird, right, to be back
Yeah, it feels
here
like old
again.
times.
Old times, only we did a montage there that really showed you talking all the time and me hardly getting a word in edgewise.
Very important.
But it wasn't like that, really.
No, you were making a lot of noise.
You only have 3 things to say that you say over and over.
And the great thing is they're always right, and right.
That's one of the things you say, actually.
And that's what things I like about me.
In all seriousness, when we started here, we already had a show on another network. We brought it here. One of the things I liked about what we were able to do, and I think we both are pretty serious about it, is we care a lot about business, and we think a lot of good things happen and some bad things happen. But we were able to show different sides of a story, which I think is, I know you don't think any other side but yours is right, but I think showing different sides is really important.
Well, I think debating is important. That's what we did. I think people enjoyed it, and I was a little country, you were a little rock and roll, or vice versa, depending on the topic. And we explored a lot of stuff that was outside of business too. I remember jamming with some rock stars here.
You brought out your guitar every now and then, yes.
So I think that's what makes the show interesting. You never know what's going to happen. It was unpredictable. And we had some amazing guests. And those panels with all those communist friends you had was amazing.
My communist friends.
Exactly.
One of the things that we share, and I think it's important, is a respect for the business community. We actually think businesses are sometimes go astray because people inside of them do bad things, but that for the most part, it's a kind of a benign, neutral thing. There's not such a thing as a bad business. They're just bad people inside there.
Yeah, it's true. And we did that during some very volatile markets. And that's what was interesting. There was always somebody thinking this would go one way when it went the other, and we would explore the story. That was terrific television, really.
I think one of the things that's important about what we do and what we did then, and we both still do it in separate ways, and we'll continue to, is trying to kind of make things understandable, right? Because people really do want to understand the world of business, and if you can explain it in a way that is interesting and they find palatable, but it helps them understand their own finances, and I know you're kind of passionate about that too, because you built a whole business around it.
Yeah, I've gotten very deep into fiscal education, and I work now teaching cohorts, primarily engineering classes, trying to convince a third of them to be entrepreneurs.
Yep.
I think we need more of those in Canada, and that's what I like to do, is to try and,
And you think people can learn that? It's not sort of inherent and you're sort of born with that spirit?
My theory is 2/3 of people will always work for somebody else, but 1/3 are always on the cusp of jumping and taking the risk. And the best time to do it is when you're in your late 20s, when you can afford to. So I'm trying to push those people that are ready to do it to go there in that direction. I was always amazed, and I was going to comment on this, that the CBC, and I have to give credit, would bring someone like me in when they did, because
CBC was amazed too.
They were sort of known as a very conservative, left-wing kind of place.
You mean small c conservative, sort of?
Well, very liberal, very conservative. You're small, correct?
As usual, I have to help you say what you really mean.
Until I arrived, Don Cherry was getting all the accolades for all the complaints, and then I moved up the feeding chain.
So in reality, what happened was I think a bit of an act of courage, because it's true.
Yeah,
You're kind of out there on the spectrum, but it's a point of view that exists in the world. Jennifer Maguire was the one who brought you in here.
And she was here during my whole tenure, and she took a lot of heat from me. Ooh.
The ombudsman at the time.
Every week another
Kirk
complaint.
LaPointe was ombudsman, and he, I think he had a full-time job just dealing with Kevin O'Leary.
I have to admit, I really wanted to get the top hit parade on that.
I
wanted to be the #1 guy with the complaints. I had to work hard at it. I'm not kidding.
Well, we've had a lot of fun over the years, and I think we did not always agree. But one thing I always felt was that we were having a good time. And other than every now and then you took a certain tone that made my mother throw things at the television.
And I think we can safely say that you're a better person from it. Don't you think? You've learned so much. I never sent you an invoice. voice for anything I taught you.
You threatened for years to take me to your capitalist boot camp, and I threatened for years to go out and find you that heart that you were actually missing.
My thing is, I've always told the truth, always, because I never have to remember what I say. That's the great thing about telling the truth. It was the truth then, it was the truth now, and it's going to be the truth in the future, long after I'm gone. I'm really the merchant of truth.
I always said you're the merchant of menace.
No,
not the merchant of truth.
Anyways, it was a great place to do television for a long time, and I think it's, in some ways, it's sort of sad. It's the last day of this show, but something new for you coming up, right?
Last day of this show with me on it, but just as when you left, we soldiered on, the show will continue, and yeah, I'm off to new things, and that's the way of life.
No, this is an important format. I think it'll be here forever at the CBC.
Agreed. Well, it's good to see you.
You too.
You may have a little bit of a heart in there.
No, don't even think that for a second.
Okay. On Fridays, we usually wrap up the week's top stories. Today, we're going to take a look back even further. The producers of the show picked some of their favorite moments from the past 6 years. Here are some highlights. Critics say this is exactly the kind of excess that put Dubai at risk. It brings us to what Canada would fear most, and that is a second credit crisis. This isn't about traders or numbers on paper. This is real business with real costs. The minute investors can't trust it, the minute a price isn't real or something is rigged, the minute it's not fair, something really important breaks down. You don't think you ever did anything unbecoming a prime minister?
I don't think that I've ever knowingly done anything wrong in my life.
There are people who will always think of you as the guy that killed the bike courier with his car.
Yeah, I can't. I know, and I can't control that.
When you talk particularly of Osama bin Laden and complicity in his being harbored there for 5 years, that I don't believe.
If he had been there for 5 years, he was there on your watch?
Yes, certainly.
You feel as though you've got a bit of an image burnishing to do for Toronto?
I don't feel it. I mean, I know it because people tell me that.
If you're not on board, we're doing it for you. Why go that route?
I never set myself up for fights. It must be some other minister who did that.
Canadian banks have actually come through this in a much stronger...
They're very smug about it.
Yeah, well, you know, and in some ways deservedly so.
Still hugely important, though, that you remain the capital of finance.
Correct. I'm not going to deny that for a second.
Are you ever insecure about your creativity? Ever uncertain that you will be able to produce the kind of work you want?
No.
I do feel that my job's to kind of almost creatively sort of stir the pot. And it seems to work. It does.
It does. One thing you didn't do, and it sets you apart, of course, is you didn't dope.
Right.
Ever.
Ever. Correct.
Why not? Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. Can that be unpleasant?
That's always the story of the unpleasant truth that the IMF has to tell.
What would you like to have happen at the end of all of this?
I think that there needs to be an end to mass surveillance.
What happens to Apple Post jobs? What's on the other side of Steve Jobs?
Who knows? Who could say?
Will Facebook be the bank of the future, the Netflix of the future?
I think we're very, very focused on being the social technology of the present and the future.
What's your time frame?
The time frame for this interview, it's about 30 more seconds.
Getting the whole thing done. Fixing all of the world's problems.
All of the world's problems. The world will always have problems.
That's just a sample of the incredible opportunity that we've had here on this show to talk to fascinating people, go to interesting places, and learn every day about the world. When we're doing the job right, we're entertaining you, but also making complex stories more digestible and hopefully challenging you to see a different point of view. One of the most important roles I think a journalist can have is approaching every story with an open mind and being willing to showcase points of view we might not agree with. Being part of a show like this is a huge privilege. So while I say thanks to the many talented people who take it to air, I want to say thanks to you too for being with us. And while I'm moving on, the show is not. You'll find it right back here after the election on Tuesday. And for one last time for me here at CBC, thanks for watching.